Welcome back. For those who might have come in after this morning's fireworks, I am Greg Poling. I direct the Southeast Asia program and AMTI here at CSIS. We're going to kick off our lunch keynote. So we are very honored to have Assistant Secretary of Defense Eli Ratner back. Eli spoke at this very conference 2 years ago, made some waves for us. I can't promise he'll do the same today, but we can be hopeful. For those who don't know, ASD Ratner has been the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs from the beginning of the Biden administration. Before that, he served at the Center for New American Security as the Executive Vice President and Director of Studies. And during the Obama administration, he was the Deputy National Security Advisor to then Vice President Joe Biden from 2015 to 2017, along with a storied career before that, including a stint at the State Department and one previous stint at CNAS as well. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Assistant Secretary of Defense Eli Ratner for our lunch keynote.
Okay, well, thank you, Greg, for that introduction, and thank you, as always, to CSIS for bringing together the South China Sea Conference, and to all of you for being here today. And see so many friends, Murray and others in the audience today, so wonderful to see you all. This conference continues to be one of the most important gatherings of experts on security issues in the Indo-Pacific. Not just here in Washington, but across the country, and indeed in the whole region. And I've always really learned a lot from the valuable insights from the discussions with the people here, whether as a think tanker, as Greg mentioned, or in my current role at the Department of Defense. As Greg mentioned, when I last spoke at this conference in 2022, I devoted a significant portion of my remarks to a major concern of ours at the time, which was the sharp increase in coercive and risky PLA operational behavior against U.S. assets in the South China Sea. A lot has happened since then, and I'd welcome the chance to discuss that further during our question and answer session in a few minutes. But if the biggest headlines from those remarks 2 years ago was about one of the issues that most concerned us at the time, today I want to talk about an aspect of the department's track record in the region that we're particularly proud of. And that's the historic progress that we're seeing in the alliance between the United States and the Philippines. Now, observers have used a variety of adjectives to describe what Washington and Manila have delivered together in the past 3.5 years. But I believe that historians will record this period in the alliance as truly transformative and decisive, as emblematic of broader strategic changes across the Indo-Pacific, as the direct result of leadership by both President Biden and President Marcos, and as a central feature of Secretary Austin's legacy in the region. That's because over the course of this administration, we have elevated the U.S.-Philippines alliance to stand among our most vital defense partnerships in the world. We've raised the profile of alliance engagements. We've stood shoulder to shoulder with Manila in the midst of a changing security environment. We've delivered major agreements for U.S. rotational presence in the Philippines and sought unprecedented funding to support these agreements. We've taken major steps to increase interoperability with the Philippines and our support for the modernization of the armed forces of the Philippines. And we've pursued new opportunities together with the Philippines to cooperate multilaterally with like-minded partners across the Indo-Pacific in support of a shared vision for a free and open region. Of course, sometimes when you're following these issues day to day, as I know many of you are, it can be difficult to step back and take stock of the totality of what we've achieved in the U.S.-Philippines alliance over the past several years. So today I wanted to walk through each of these key areas of progress to give you all a fuller picture of how we at DoD are thinking about the alliance right now, as well as where we see opportunities in the months and years ahead. First, we've seen unprecedented senior leader engagement between Washington and Manila since the start of the Biden administration, including and especially by Secretary Austin. He's invested countless hours in this relationship, and that has directly resulted in greater personal trust as our two countries push forward major defense priorities. As some of you may know, I was actually sworn in by Secretary Austin as he was flying out to the region in the summer of 2021. And one of the most important elements of that trip involved a stop in Manila, where Secretary Austin met with then President Duterte. And I will never forget that engagement, which marked a key turning point at a critical time in the alliance. In the wake of that meeting, we saw a renewed commitment to the alliance on both sides, and the trajectory picked up considerable momentum under the leadership of President Marcos, who Secretary Austin has hosted at the Pentagon on multiple occasions. In fact, when President Marcos was back at the Pentagon just this past April, Secretary Austin repeated something that he says frequently, both in public and private, which is, and I'm quoting here, that our two countries are more than allies, we're family. And I think you've seen that sense of conviction at the core of Secretary Austin's engagements with his counterparts from the Department of National Defense, including most recently with Secretary Teodoro. The two of them have met together here in Washington, in Hawaii, in Jakarta, and in Singapore. They speak regularly on the phone. Together, they participated in April's historic 3+3 meeting with their diplomatic counterparts and the national security advisors from our two countries, and they're poised to meet again soon with Secretary Blinken and Secretary Manalo for another 2+2 ministerial. And that kind of personal investment has yielded enormous dividends for our defense and security cooperation with the Philippines. And this brings me to my second point about how we've continued to stand with our ally as Manila defends its lawful rights in the South China Sea, including at Second Thomas Shoal, which as I believe the previous panel likely discussed, is a low tide elevation beyond any lawful territorial sea. It's on the Philippines continental shelf and well within the Philippines exclusive economic zone. I know that's a lot of legalese, but I also know there are a lot of experts here. I saw Bob Harris earlier, as well as around the world, who understand exactly what I'm describing. And let me be clear that the PRC's claim to the shoal has no more credibility today than it did when the Arbitral Tribunal issued its unanimous ruling in 2016. And the kind of revisionism and coercion we've seen there from the PRC is both destabilizing and dangerous. This aggressive PRC behavior stands in sharp contrast to the remarkable leadership by President Marcos and his team in protecting the well-being of the Philippine troops on the BRP Sierra Madre and in defending the rights of the Philippines under international law. All the while, the United States has acted in support of the Philippines and made clear that our alliance commitments are ironclad and that all nations should be able to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows. Importantly, our cooperation with the Philippines extends well beyond our support for their lawful operations at Second Thomas Shoal and other parts of their exclusive economic zone. And that's my third point today, which is about the significance of what we've delivered together in terms of force posture. Looking back, 2023 was a transformative year for making U.S. force posture in the Indo-Pacific more mobile, distributed, resilient, and lethal. Secretary Austin said in December that it was a decisive year in a decisive decade for our defense priorities with allies and partners in the region. In our decision with the Philippines in 2023 to expand U.S. rotational access to 4 new strategic sites under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement was a highlight in a year that saw a series of major announcements. And we're committed to continuing to invest in infrastructure improvements at all 9 AUKUS sites to strengthen combined training, exercises, and interoperability between our forces, as well as to support humanitarian assistance and disaster response efforts. In fact, the Biden administration's budget request this year includes more than $120 million for these efforts, which in just 1 year is more than double than we've invested in EDCA infrastructure to date. We've seen strong bipartisan support on Capitol Hill for the U.S.-Philippines alliance, and this year's budget is a historic opportunity to keep delivering. And as we've reached new agreements with the Philippines on force posture, we've also undertaken a range of other efforts to modernize our defense cooperation, deepen our interoperability, accelerate the Philippines' capability development. And that's my fourth point. On these issues, the Department's track record with the Philippines since the start of this administration has been defined by historic mosts, firsts, and first evers. The first combined maritime exercises in the South China Sea in years, the largest ever Balikatan exercise, and the first ever to involve HIMARS and cyber defense elements. The first ever visit of fifth-generation U.S. fighter jets to the Philippines, our first ever combined air patrol, and our first ever combined UAV engagement, and new bilateral defense guidelines to provide strategic direction and focus for all of these initiatives. And we're poised to deliver so much more together in the future, including in the coming months. As you've seen publicly, the United States and the Philippines are discussing the conclusion of a General Security of Military Information Agreement, or what experts commonly refer to as a GSOMIA, that will strengthen and expand our information sharing. We're also working together on a security sector assistance roadmap to help prioritize shared investments in the modernization of Philippine forces. And while I don't have anything to announce today, regarding the foreign military financing included in the Indo-Pacific National Security Supplemental that Congress passed this spring, let me just say that we recognize Capitol Hill's sense of urgency and prioritization when it comes to our support for Manila, and we'll have more to say on that soon. And I would also be remiss if I didn't mention the continued work of the Quad partners in support of the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative, or IPMDA, and the benefits that effort will yield for partners across the South China Sea region, including the Philippines. Fifth and finally, the historic growth in the alliance between the United States and the Philippines has helped enable a growing community of minilateral cooperation across the region, and I believe that will be a discussion topic for later today at the conference. In fact, at this year's Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, Secretary Austin described this growing trend as a new convergence around nearly all aspects of security in the Indo-Pacific. This is not a single coalition or institution, and it's certainly not like any other arrangement in any other region. Instead, it's unique to the opportunities and challenges of the Indo-Pacific, comprised of like-minded countries who share a vision for what the region can and should look like. And 2 months ago in Hawaii, the defense ministers from Australia, Japan, the Philippines, and the United States held their first ever joint press conference after a long day of meetings together. And for me, that event really captured the spirit of this new convergence, our shared sense of momentum, and yes, the vital role of the Philippines. The future we're striving toward is one with greater interoperability and cooperation among like-minded Indo-Pacific partners. And this means enhanced reciprocal access, more participation in larger and more complex regional exercises, greater investment together in advanced capabilities. And Manila stands at an intersection of all of that. Now, the new convergence in the Indo-Pacific won't always start or include the United States, and nor should it. That's why, for example, we are really encouraged by the important opportunities that will emerge from the Reciprocal Access Agreement announced just this week between Japan and the Philippines. So in closing, I'll just say again that the recent growth of the U.S.-Philippines alliance has been nothing short of remarkable. In fact, some of what we have achieved together would have been simply unimaginable during that flight out to the region 3 years ago. And yet here we are today with a future trajectory that is as clear as it is promising. We've delivered historic results together, and we have more achievements still to come. So thank you again to Greg and to CIS for this opportunity to talk about this administration's track record with the Philippines since taking office, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Eli. I noted that you didn't address the June 17th incident, and somebody's going to ask it anyway, so it might as well be me. Just anything you want to say about what happened to our Philippine allies on June 17th, what the implications are for the alliance, potential MDT activation, how we think about our response should it happen again?
Well, happy to, we on here?
I think so.
There we go. I think I'm on. How about now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Rick. Thanks again for the opportunity. I should have said also at the beginning, Greg himself and CIS as an institution is doing some of the best and most important work on the Philippines relationship, and has been for many, many, many years before it was the topic of singular keynote addresses here at CSIS. So Greg has been ahead of the curve, and we at the department continue to look to his wisdom and research and counsel on almost everything we're doing. So just really wonderful to be here. Look, let me just say on the recent events, I mean, obviously, the world saw what happened there. We think the transparency that has been part of the Philippines' approach to issues in the South China Sea has been important to set the record straight about the activities of the PRC, which, as I described, are inconsistent with international law. They're coercive. They're destabilizing. Well, the Philippines is conducting lawful activities to protect its troops and to exercise its rights under international law. And that was on full display in recent events. In terms of the MDT, I know there have been a lot of questions about this. Again, I am not here to make news. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals, but what I will say is what's real. And what's real is the United States has said repeatedly that its commitment to the Philippines is ironclad. We have said this publicly and privately. We are working every day in close coordination at all levels, at political levels, diplomatic levels, military levels. And the work of the alliance is charging forward as events in the South China Sea are unfolding. And as I said, we are moving forward with posture, strengthening the capabilities of the AFP, engaging multilaterally, and that is really important. But what is also real is that the PRC's activities continue to be destabilizing and coercive. And so, well, I understand there are a lot of questions and hypotheticals about the MDT. I think the most important question should be about the PRC and what this behavior reveals about their intentions. And the lens ought to be more focused on that than on pressing questions to the United States and the Philippines about the MDT.
Fair enough. All right. Blink twice. All right. Let's talk about China then. When you were here 2 years ago, a big chunk of your focus was on the, at that time, very worrying rise in the frequency of unsafe air-to-air intercepts. That seemed to continue until President Biden and President Xi met after APEC. And then Indo-PACOM, at least at the beginning of this year, said that those had decreased. Are we still not comfortable? Are we more comfortable than we were last time you were here with the behavior of the PLA Air Force toward the U.S. and our allies, at least in the skies above the East and South China Sea?
Well, I'll say we're never comfortable because one of these events is too many, and there continue to be activities in the skies in the Indo-Pacific that are of concern against U.S. forces who are operating legally in accordance with international law. However, the rate of the activities that I spoke about over the last couple years ago have in fact decreased, and that is encouraging, and would like to think that is a recognition of the fact that that behavior was both inconsistent with international law and quite dangerous, which was what the purpose of the remarks were at the time, and we've had the opportunity to engage directly with the PLA since then, both at the operator level and at the ministerial level. So there has been a significant decrease in some of those activities against U.S. forces. I think the challenge is that we continue to see ringing the East Asian littoral continued dangerous, coercive, risky behavior against U.S. allies and partners. And that is no less dangerous and no less risky and no less serious. And that behavior should stop as well. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time probably today talking about Second Thomas Shoal and what we're seeing in and around the South China Sea. That type of behavior is happening elsewhere as well against other U.S. allies and partners. So the overall pattern of coercive and revisionist, destabilizing, dangerous behavior continues, but it is encouraging that the particular air intercepts that we spoke about a couple years ago have in fact decreased.
Okay, thank you. And at the end of the month, you'll be going out with the Secretary for the 2+2 in Manila. Obviously, all of this is going to be in the ether, but any specific issues that you'd like to highlight that'll be pushed forward at that meeting?
Look, I think we're going to be, some of them previewed in the remarks I just made about the work that we are doing on the security sector assistance roadmap. That's a new effort to align, to have bilateral consensus on the types of capabilities that we want to be focused on in our support for Philippines military modernization. We are also, again, working with Congress on substantially increasing the level of security assistance for the AFP as they are thinking about working to transition to a different type of military in a way that is will strengthen deterrence in the region. So there is the defense cooperation space. We are also working on some of the multilateral and minilateral issues that I mentioned, following up on the meetings that the Secretary has had in Hawaii and some of the cooperation we're doing with Japan in Australia that is quite significant, and a series of, again, other defense bilateral issues. So I think it will stand as a really important event. I should note as well that the Secretary and Secretary Blinken have scheduled a series of 2+2s over the next couple of months, also with Japan, with the Philippines, and then with Australia, the annual OSMAN talk. So a lot of what we are doing with the Philippines is of course important in a bilateral context, but it is set in a broader regional strategy in which each of these elements, whether we're talking about force posture, capability support, minilateral support, is occurring on a regional scale. And this set of engagements, I think, will really be unprecedented in terms of knitting together a lot of our connected efforts. And I should also say, talk to people frequently who, when they come in to see me now, been in the role now 3+ years, and they say, look, we're getting into the last 6 months of the first term. You must just really be focused on nailing down what you've already done and institutionalizing what you've already done. And in fact, that's not the case in terms of what we are only doing. Of course, we are doing that. But I think what we have found is that the energy that we have put into the initiatives over the last couple of years has reached an escape velocity of its own that is creating even more momentum and new opportunities. So I would expect that we will continue, including during the 2+2, to be able to put big new initiatives on the board, big new innovative, entrepreneurial, strategically important momentum in the alliance, and that will continue over the next several months.
Thanks. Okay, let's turn to the audience. So for those of you online, you can go ahead and write them in. We can see them on the screen. For those in the room, if you want to line up by the mic, and I'll call on you in order. Let me go to the screen first, because Charlie Brown with YCAPS out in Singapore got his in while you were still at the podium, so he deserves to be read first. Charlie asked, what are some of the recent achievements of the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness, and what activities are anticipated? Will they require new or existing sources of security cooperation funding? Okay, so for those a little bit less familiar, the IPMDA is an initiative that is run through the Quad arrangement with the United States, Japan, Philippines, and India. And the 4 countries have come together and through diplomatic and funding support are providing commercially available satellite imagery to countries for free throughout the Indo-Pacific. And this is really important because, as you all know, a lot of the countries in the region don't necessarily have, I feel like we've got a spotlight here. We dropped the lights. It's okay. There we go. They're coming back
Can't
up.
see all my friends in the audience here.
All right, there we go.
All those nodding, smiling faces at my every word. I appreciate that. No, in all seriousness, why this is so important, because a number of these countries do not have sufficient maritime domain awareness to be able to really know what's going on in their waters. What they have capabilities potentially to be able to go out and deal with discrete crises. But this was described to me as, the capabilities that they have now is akin to a police officer driving around patrolling a neighborhood. What IPMDA allows is a fuller picture to be able to inform, in particular, maritime law enforcement agencies to know, okay, this is where I need to go to deal with an illegal activity, illegal fishing, or a ship in distress or otherwise. So really important capability that really hits home for the issues that are most important to maritime countries in Southeast Asia. So the question about where is this headed? The effort over the last couple of years, in addition to standing it up, has been increasing the geographic scope of the effort, and we are aiming toward, as there is every year, a Quad Leaders Summit later this year, and are hoping to be able to introduce, aiming to be able to introduce a little bit of what we're calling IPMDA 2.0, which will be potentially offering new capabilities and as well as training for some of the host countries to be able to use and absorb the information they're getting. So the underlying concepts will remain the same in the years ahead, but hoping to enrich and deepen the ability of recipient countries to really use the information that they're getting.
All right, thanks. Okay, let's go in the room. Why don't we go 2 by 2 so you don't have to stand in line for so long. So we'll take the first 2 questions.
Assistant Secretary Radner, thanks for speaking to us today. My name is Reese Bro. I'm with the China program at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And I'm deeply concerned that the United States isn't doing enough to deter China vis-a-vis the Philippines, vis-a-vis the Senkaku Islands with Japan. It seems to me that the EDCA sites and enhanced maritime cooperation activity is not doing what's needed to do to signal to Beijing that we are credible, that we will defend them. I'm asking, what's your read on Beijing's willingness to test our credibility? Do you believe that we're doing enough at this moment? Thank you.
Thanks. And next one.
Hi, my name is Nathan McCory. I'm a graduate student at Princeton. In the event that China decides to invade Taiwan in the future, if that should happen, how likely do you think it is that the conflict would spread to the South China Sea and pull in the Philippines and Chinese bases? And how decisive or important would that theater be to the primary conflict? Thank you.
A couple of nice and simple
Okay,
questions.
no, those are great questions. So to the first, our assessment and multiple senior leaders have said this from the department is that we believe that deterrence in the Indo-Pacific is real and it's strong. In the case of Taiwan, I know that wasn't the specific question in the first instance, but department leaders have said repeatedly that we believe that an invasion or a PRC act of aggression is neither imminent nor inevitable. But we've got a lot of work to do to keep it that way. And so I think we are confident in our deterrence today, but also have identified the PRC as the pacing challenge for the department in the 2022 National Defense Strategy, an unprecedented act by the Department of Defense to identify the PRC as the principal challenge. And we have, as a result of that strategy, delivered the most strategy-driven budgets in the department's history focused on capabilities relevant to deterrence and warfighting in the Indo-Pacific. In the meantime, we have been rapidly updating concepts of operations to deal with the operational problems presented in the Indo-Pacific. And we have been, as I mentioned, making absolutely historical, transformative changes, unprecedented in our force posture, whether that's in Japan, in the Philippines, in Australia, and elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific. And we are working with allies like never before, to the point that the question is not whether the United States is effectively deterring China, but rather whether the United States and its allies and partners are effectively deterring China. And that's an important evolution as we look at strategic dynamics in the region. So it's a good question. We take it with utmost seriousness, and it undergirds the urgency that drives us in the department every day. So thank you for that question. On the second question, don't want to get into hypotheticals about conflict scenarios, but I think it is a good segue into thinking about the connectivity of the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea as important parts of at least a vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific that we share with our allies and partners. And I would just underscore that point, one that Secretary Austin has made a number of times, that when he goes out to the Shangri-La Dialogue or ADMM Plus, the ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting, or he meets with his counterparts, he's not talking about his vision or America's vision for the region. He's talking about a shared vision with our like-minded allies and partners. And part of that shared vision relates to maintaining peace and stability in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait, maintaining the status quo, settling disputes through peaceful means and not coercion and aggression. So these are part of a similar story. I think they also connect when questions arise about, well, why does this matter, right? Why does the South China Sea matter? Why does the Taiwan Strait matter, or peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait? And the economic implications and consequences of these regions, water and waterways, and the imperative for the global economy of maintaining stability there are shared between the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea, and one is a choke point to the other. And so to the extent that there is, as you mentioned, instability in one area, I think we would not want to assume that it would not have any effect on regional stability, and certainly not regional economics in partner regions. So I do think these regions are connected. They're obviously connected by geography, they're connected by economies, they are connected by a pattern of PRC malign behavior, and they are connected by a shared vision with US allies and partners for sustaining the status quo.
Thank you. All right, let's take our next two.
Hi, my name is Yuko Mukai from Japanese newspaper Yomiuri Shimbun, also a non-resident fellow Project 2049. My question is about U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty. And what happened on June 17th was quite shocking, and it seems Chinese behavior was very aggressive. What was missing to invoke that treaty? And also, President Marcos mentioned that in his press conference in this April, if somebody dies on the Philippine side, that treaty will be invoked. Does the U.S. on the same side with Philippines?
Thank you. And you, sir?
Thank you, sir. My name is Ido Leidner. I am a student at American University, and surprisingly kind of related to the former question, the U.S. has definitely shown its investment in the security of the Philippines, but it also previously in the Biden administration has shown a lot of similar enthusiasm towards Vietnam. And as we know, well, China is arguably the most belligerent of the members of the South China Sea dispute. It is not the only one with a claim, and I was just wondering to hear how does the U.S. prepare for a possibility where two countries with which they have a security alliance or security treaty with might have competing claims and potentially could entangle the U.S. in bureaucratic and alliance blunder.
Thank you.
Do you want to answer? Greg's chomping at the bit to answer questions about the question there. No, but let me...
Today is the only day I don't have to answer South China Sea questions.
Well, I'll take the last one, which is just for clarification's sake. The United States does not have a formal treaty alliance with Vietnam, so it is a different type of arrangement than it has with the Philippines. That being said, we are quite concerned about similar activity that PRC actors, whether it's the Maritime militia, whether it's the Chinese Coast Guard or the PLA Navy, are engaging in, which are similarly coercive and often interfering with lawful activity that Vietnam is undertaking. So that behavior that has been occurring against the Philippines, as I think everybody here knows, versions of it have been occurring against Vietnam and other South China Sea claimants. I would say I have been encouraged by a lot of the discussions that are occurring between claimant states. In some instances, they have in fact engaged in diplomacy to try to settle and manage some of their competing disputes. In other instances, they have found ways to come to a modus vivendi around those disputes. And I do not see any other claimants besides the PRC engaging in anything remotely close to the kind of aggressive and coercive activity. So it is not the case that there are regular violent clashes between other South China Sea claimants over disputed features, and I think that is because there's been a commitment to diplomacy, a commitment to working through ASEAN, and a lot of, frankly, bilateral diplomacy and bilateral discussions about how to manage this. So I think it's important to view this as a regional issue. I know the Philippines has done that and has been engaging in a lot of important discussions with countries around the region, which is important because, again, for reasons we were just discussing earlier, this is a regional issue, not just because of the Taiwan question, but because of the South China Sea as a whole. The PRC has made clear that their ambition is to have effective control over the South China Sea, and we have seen when they do that, what that means for their demands about the passage of military vessels or commercial vessels or other types of flow of commerce or lawful activity. So every country in the South China Sea and every country in the world has an interest in keeping the South China Sea free and open, and what happens at Second and Thomas Shoal really matters for maintaining international norms and international law. So these issues are connected regionally. On the first question, I think that was pretty similar to the first question I got from Greg on the MDT. I won't have a separate answer, which is I'm not going to be getting into hypotheticals here. U.S. officials have said repeatedly that the MDT covers the breadth of the relationship, the breadth of the geographic scope of many of the areas that we're talking about today, including the South China Sea. That's been made crystal clear, and we have said that our commitment is ironclad, and we are in very close consultation every day at all levels with Philippine counterparts on these issues. And again, I think the question is not a parlor game of under what conditions would the United States or the Philippines choose to invoke the MDT. The question is, why is the PRC engaging in this behavior, and what does that tell us about their intentions in the region? And I would encourage folks to ask that question first and foremost.
Thanks. All right, next to Murray.
So, my name is Murray Hebert. Eli, you talked a lot about and did a excellent job in spelling out what you guys are doing, what the Pentagon is doing with the Philippines in terms of increasing maritime domain awareness and various trainings, et cetera. And you started talking a little bit about Vietnam, but could you maybe just tell us a bit more what the U.S. and Vietnam are doing cooperatively on the military front in the South China Sea? And I'd also be curious what might be happening with Malaysia and with Indonesia in particular, because they've also been harassed quite a bit. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Murray, and wonderful to see you. I like the ponytail.
It's amazing what you can do when you're just a non-resident.
Yeah,
CSIS.
that's right. No, look, I think on Vietnam, again, tons of expertise here in the room. As I think folks know, we're within a year of the upgrade of our partnership to a comprehensive strategic partnership, which is meaningful and from a bureaucratic perspective in terms of unlocking new forms of cooperation. We still spend a lot of time on what we consider the foundation of the defense relationship, which is working on war legacy issues. That's something I've had the opportunity to spend time on in my role, and is really meaningful work. And a lot of that historically has been our agency at the Pentagon looking for and recovering the remains of U.S. personnel in Vietnam, which is really moving and important work. And if any of you ever have the opportunity in Hawaii to visit the DPAA facility, it is quite an experience. So I would encourage you all to seek that out if you have the opportunity. But one of the innovations over the last couple of years in this space has been that the department has been not only funding and working on recovering U.S. remains, but has also been engaging in a significant data project to provide the Vietnamese with information we have and recover about the remains of their personnel. And I've had the honor, as has Secretary Austin, of actually handing over binders of data produced by American universities, compiled by American universities with this information. So we see the war legacies issue, also the dioxin issues and other related issues as foundational to the trust that we need going forward. And I think as we have built that, it has created opportunities for new discussions about maritime security. Again, Murray, not going to get into a lot of specifics here, but I will say that I think we see a lot of opportunities, particularly on maritime security. We see key roles for the Navy and the Coast Guard here, and I think this is a relationship that is as complex as they come from a historical perspective, but also one where we do clearly have shared interests and where our cooperation is growing and is absolutely on an upward trajectory. On the question of Indonesia, I will say Secretary Austin has had a number of opportunities to travel to Indonesia. He was there just last November. At that time, we were able to sign a new defense cooperation agreement, which really has set a new benchmark for the ambition and scope of our defense relationship. We are, again, not just thinking bilaterally, but multilaterally as well. And Garuda Shield, one of our premier exercises with Indonesia, is now called Super Garuda Shield. I'm actually not sure if that's the official name of it or not, but that's how we describe it. And it now includes a number of, I think, over a dozen other countries. So the U.S.-Indonesia relationship becomes an anchor for broader multilateral cooperation, which is a really important piece. And all the while, Secretary Austin has had the opportunity to develop, I think, a really good relationship with President-elect Prabowo, and they've had a chance to have a number of deep discussions about regional issues, about international issues, and I think that's been important for mutual understanding on both sides, and we look forward to working with him once he comes into office.
When Japan joins Balikatan as a full participant next year, I vote Super Balikatan. You can have
Super
that.
Balikatan.
Don't even have to
All
credit
right.
me. Next question, sir.
Good afternoon, Assistant Secretary. Thank you for being here. My name is Luke Lytle. I'm a grad student at CSIS and a U.S. Army officer. I actually had the opportunity to participate in Garuda Shield back in 2014, so that was a good time, and I know how important that whole process is. My question is about military logistics. So where do you think, what's your feel on where Southeast Asian nations are at, one of them or any of them that you think, as far as providing access to U.S. military forces for use for logistics operations in the event of some kind of crisis in the South China Sea or the Taiwan Strait? And are you optimistic about where that's going, where the situation is? Do you think there's work to be done? I appreciate it.
Okay, no, it is a really great question. Again, not going to get into hypotheticals about particular contingencies, but what I will say is what you have seen over the last couple years is, as I was describing earlier, a real transformative change in our force posture in the Indo-Pacific, from one that was heavily concentrated in Northeast Asia to one that is far more distributed, mobile, lethal, and resilient. And that was a very intentional choice. That is something that good folks here at CSIS and elsewhere in the think tank community have been writing about, including myself, as an aspiration for well over a decade. And in the last couple of years, we've started to make that real in concert with our allies and partners. So you are now seeing a much more distributed U.S. force posture that will be developing in the Philippines, in Papua New Guinea, in Australia, Singapore, elsewhere in the region. And my belief, I think our collective belief, is that, and I think it's the reason why countries are interested in hosting U.S. forces, is because this reinforces deterrence for a whole host of reasons. And it allows our militaries to cooperate more together, to train more together, to be more ready and available for potentially regional contingencies, but also humanitarian assistance and disaster response. So there's a lot of great opportunities that stem from being more distributed and being more present. And I think what we are seeing now is really fundamental steps in terms of what that more distributed laydown looks like. That will give us the opportunity to deepen our relationships with all of these partners across a whole wide set of activities. So I would see it as a evolution, and these questions about what would happen if and when, I think are less relevant than what are the work we're doing, what does that mean for regional stability and regional security and deterrence.
Thanks. All right, we're under 10 minutes and 4 questions to go, so let's see how we can do here. First, let me go online, then Jim, I'm going to ask you to pile on. So Christopher Woody asked, while Tokyo and Manila have worked closely with the U.S. on recent force posture initiatives, there has been some local concerns about enhancing the U.S. military presence. How have those concerns influenced your pursuit of these initiatives? And then if you don't mind, let's also pile on Jim's question.
Hi, Eli, Jim Caruso, also senior advisor, non-resident CSIS, but I can't rock Murray's ponytail, so I don't try. A big missing element in the past dozen years has been Indonesian leadership in the region, including in ASEAN. Now, President-elect Prabowo is a general, man of action. Do you expect Indonesian leadership to be much more active, and what effect do you think that might have on the region?
Okay, on the first question, really important question around the local politics, local issues associated with U.S. presence in foreign countries. This is something we deal with, again, on a daily basis because it is so important. Of course, worth noting the difference between, well, Japan and the Philippines were combined in that question. The United States does not have permanent military bases in the Philippines. We have rotational access, which is really important but different than the major operating bases that we do have in Japan. So that does change some of the dynamics and focus associated with that. But nonetheless, local issues are absolutely paramount to the success of these efforts, and that's why there has been a real effort to demonstrate the value of these locations to local communities and to domestic publics in terms of why they're there and what they're doing. It also puts a premium on ensuring that the investment that is going into these locations is supporting local communities and that the military members in these communities are engaging in a productive way with the local community. And that's something that is an absolute priority for the department and will continue to be as it relates to continuing to develop our program with the EDCA location. So I think it's a good suggestion and it's a good point. And it also speaks to the reason why we have approached these issues not just as a military defense issue, but also one that's a whole of government issue, ensuring that we have economics and development and diplomacy as part of our force posture discussions to ensure that there is that comprehensive whole of government approach. So important issue and we will continue to keep focused on it. As it relates to the future role of Indonesia, Greg, what's your answer to that question? And then I'll give mine.
I don't have to answer it today. I'm a moderator.
Try again. Try to pull on the expertise here. Look, what I will say again is Secretary Austin and to date, Minister Prabowo have had a terrific relationship. They've had a number of engagements. Minister Prabowo is clearly engaged on foreign policy and defense issues. He is knowledgeable on these issues. He's energetic and entrepreneurial, and I would expect him to bring all of that to the office of the president, and we look forward to working with him when he does, and Secretary Austin looks forward to working with the new defense minister as well. And again, like every defense partnership in the region, the U.S.-Indonesia partnership is on the upswing, and we've got a lot of exciting opportunities ahead of us.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
Okay, good.
That's what I was going to say.
My answer was correct.
All right, the last two we'll give to Bic and Huang.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Bic Chen, adjunct fellow with CSIS here. The former commander of Indo-PACOM, during his testimony to the Congress, mentioned the second ASEAN maritime exercise. So I wonder if you have any update on that, whether it's happening. Thanks.
Thanks. Huang?
So Huang from South China Sea Institute, Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. So you mentioned the number of dangerous encounters between the US and China has gone down. Do you attribute it solely to the re-engagement policy of Biden toward China? And has there been any discussions on how to maintain that channel in case of domestic politic changes after your elections? Thanks.
Okay, the first answer was much easier to answer than the second one, but on this question of a second ASEAN military exercise, I think that is something we are very interested in. We continue to have discussions with ASEAN about what that would look like in terms of timing and other modalities, and those conversations are moving forward. Again, nothing to announce today, but it is important. ASEAN remains centrally important. That is why Secretary Austin has attended every ADMM Plus since coming into office, and is now one of the old guards when he gets together with ASEAN defense ministers, is somebody who's been there the longest, along with sometimes Minister Prabowo, Minister Ng from Singapore, and others. So yes, we aspire toward that, and hopefully we'll be able to move toward that at some point in the future. On the intercepts question, I think the question was, why has that happened, and how does that connect to, I think, military-to-military engagement between the United States and the PRC, or other types of diplomatic engagement. Maybe I'll just pull a couple of these threads together. I think to the first question, you'll have to ask the PRC and leaders in Beijing as to exactly why those intercepts have fallen. I think our argument was that they were coercive and dangerous and risky, and that it was important that they stop, because the implications of an accident or incident is something that nobody in this room, in the region, in the PRC, in the United States, or anywhere in the world wants to face. And so it was unnecessary, and it was important that it stopped. So again, defer to the PRC to explain exactly why they have reduced their risky and unsafe intercepts. On the second question, whether it's related to this issue, the South China Sea issue, issues related to Taiwan or otherwise, we continue to believe that it's very important to maintain open lines of military-to-military communication with the PRC. This is something that Secretary Austin said very early on in his tenure as secretary, and it is something he has been absolutely consistent on over the last several years, even as the PRC's own willingness to engage in those military-to-military engagements has waxed and waned. So we have seen since last November the restart of a number of military-to-military engagements. We had our chairman of our Joint Chiefs of Staff engage with his counterpart. We have renewed policy-level dialogues that are led at the DASD level at the Pentagon. We have pursued back to the operator-level communications. We had a meeting in Hawaii at the operator level. I have had a chance to engage in a video conference with my counterpart at OIMC. The secretary at Shangri-La for the first time had a face-to-face engagement with the PRC defense minister. So many of these lines of communication have reopened. Some have not. I should mention that our leaders, President Biden and Chairman Xi, had the opportunity to meet last November, and they directed their defense departments to do a number of things, some of which I just described, but also to have communications between our theater commanders. That's on this end would now be Admiral Paparo, Commander Indo-PACOM, with the Southern Theater Command, Eastern Theater Command, and others in the PLA. And the PLA has yet to agree to that engagement, which we think is really important. It's last on the list of the things that our leaders committed to, but it is not the last in importance. And we think it's critical that that happen in the coming months, and we will be looking to execute that. And we would just continue to say that we believe these communications are important, even when tensions are high, especially when tensions are high, and we will look to Beijing to maintain those communications under all circumstances.
Thank you. All right, that is our time. We're going to take a 10-minute coffee break before the next panel on alliances. But first, please join me in thanking Assistant Secretary Rao.